So now we've looked at how we can graph the absolute value function. F of x equals absolute value of x. That's this black function here. And we've also talked about how we can change the way that function looks by doing different things to our function. So I could do something like this. F of x is the absolute value of x minus 2. And what we saw is that that ends up shifting the graph right by 2. So when I add or subtract a number on the inside of that absolute value function, that's going to be a shift to the right or to the left. We also saw that I could add or subtract a number on the outside of the absolute value function. So if I do f of x equals x and then, absolute value of x and then plus 3, now this graph is going to move up or down, and it moves up because I'm adding 3. So when I add or subtract a number on the outside of the absolute value function, that's going to shift it up or down. And then the other type of transformation we talked about is I could put a number multiplying by the absolute value. So here, what if I did f of x is negative times the absolute value of x? And we saw that that just flips our whole graph upside down. Whoops, I'll show you one more time. So here are the 3 different ways we can move an absolute value graph around. We can add something on the inside of the absolute value to move it left or right. We can add on the outside to move it up or down. And we can also multiply it by something to flip it upside down or to change the slope. So that's true of functions in general, not just the absolute value function. So if I give you any function f of x, what we call the parent function, then I can transform the parent function with these 3 other letters, a, h, and k. So we call this a transformed function. And we'll look at some examples in a second. It should make more sense. But here's what these numbers mean. A is going to be our vertical stretch, right? So is the graph getting steeper or flatter? So we saw that when a was a fraction between -1 and 1, that made the whole graph get flatter. And we also saw that when a was not a fraction, when the absolute value of a was bigger than 1, that's going to make our whole graph steeper. So we're talking about the slope here. And we also saw that if a is negative, that means our whole graph is going to flip upside down, right? Because all the y values then become negative. So h is our horizontal shift. So that was how is the graph moving left or right? And it's important to remember that in our equation up at the top there, we have minus h on the inside of the parentheses, but h is what we're shifting by. So if you see, like, here, we'll go back here. If you see, right, absolute value of x minus 2, here we actually shift to the right by 2. So that's positive 2 because over here, right, we see it's x minus h. Then we have k, which is our vertical shift. So this is the graph moving up or down. And then again, a reminder that the horizontal shift h, that's what we're doing on the inside of the function. That's going to move it left or right. So let's look at some examples. If I have this graph, f of x, and then let's say I put a second graph here. Well, how can I describe this graph in red in relation to the one that I've already drawn in black? We notice that this graph in red looks just like f of x, except it's been shifted a little bit. Well, how has it been shifted? If you look at this, you'll actually see that it's been shifted to the right by 3 and down by 3. So here's my equation for that. I have h is 3, right? If I do f of x minus h plus k, well, I noticed that h equals 3. So it goes to the right by 3, and k is negative 3. So it's going to shift down by 3. Let's look at another one. If this is f of x, then what about this graph here on the bottom? Well, the first thing I notice is the whole thing has flipped upside down. So that tells me there's going to be a negative here. So now I actually have, this is the equation for the graph in blue. Remember, if I write a times f of x minus h plus k, well, here my a equals negative 1. So that's why my whole graph is going to flip upside down. And then I've got my h is 2. So the whole graph is going to shift right by 2, and it is going to flipped upside down. So that's how different things we do to functions can transform the graph. We can move them up, down, left, or right, or we can also stretch them or flip them.